this big long-term.
When are we going to get?
Okay. Good evening, good morning. This is an introduction lesson to modern monetary theory. This way, this going this way. Would be grateful if you shared this around to anywhere. Everyone needs to learn modern monetary theory, especially those who might want a Bernie Sanders presidency, but it's really important regardless. So thank you for sharing this around, and let's get started.
When are we going to get serious, Candy, about the debt?
We got to deal with this big long-term debt problem, or it will deal with us.
But it's very simple. The government works like your house works. Our government has promised far more money than it actually has or probably ever will have.
We have to reduce our deficit, and we have to get back on a path that will allow us to pay down our debt.
We understand America is broke.
There is an urgent need for us to contain the growth of the deficit.
Taking money from our children and borrowing from China.
Our rising debt levels poses a national security threat.
We're broke. America's broke. Is to take out a credit card from the Bank of China in the name of our children, driving up our national debt.
When we raise and borrow all this money, 42 cents out of every dollar coming out of Washington, it's borrowed. 47% is coming from other countries like China.
So this is an introduction lesson for modern monetary theory. My name is Jeff Epstein. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Citizens Media TV. I gave a previous version of this lesson last year at the second annual International MMT Conference in New York City. This version is completely different. There are pieces, if you know the original version, there are pieces that you'll recognize. But largely, it's just totally rewritten. So I want to thank especially for helping me improve this lesson to Virginia Kotz, James Field Martinez, Aaron Taylor, and Laura Earle. So here's a one-slide summary of MMT and this lesson. You're not seeing anything? What does that mean? At the second, yeah, seems fine on my end. Seems fine on my end. So a one slide summary of MMT and this presentation. Mainstream economics, what we all know, what we have always known to be that we're told is the truth. Mainstream economics says that big things are not possible without causing economic Armageddon. Modern monetary theory demonstrates that big things are possible right now and always have been without causing economic chaos. Therefore, MMT shows that everything you know about money is wrong. And not just wrong, but wrong in a way that ensures that the wealthy few stay the wealthy few. For the next hour, I thank you for having an open mind. I thank you for having an open mind and for postponing your questions until the end. all will be answered either in the presentation or when I look at your questions when we're done. I do know what I'm talking about. Afterwards, however, I encourage you to be skeptical, to do your homework, and to decide for yourself. Economists such as Stephanie Kelton will confirm everything you hear me say today. MMT, Modern Monetary Theory, is a school of economic thought based on the ideas of Warren Mosler and is now backed by 25 years of research and scholarship by economists and experts from around the world. Warren Mosler is also an author, an economist, and an automotive engineer, and he's also run for office a few times. Here are some of those economists. Most of these people can be found on Twitter and are happy to answer your questions. I am not an expert. I discovered MMT last year in February. I am good at introducing and expressing the basic concept of modern monetary theory as I learned from the economists. But once your eyes are open to MMT, then it is time to pass you off to the experts and learn more. To learn the advanced concepts and the more subtle things. Where does the US dollar come from? In 1971, the United States went off of the gold standard and became a fiat currency. This is along with Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, the UK, and others. A more recent fiat currency is the European Union. So some of this lesson focuses on the specifics of the United States, but because that's where I am. But all of it applies to most developed nations. So who authorizes the creation of the US dollar? And there is something similar in all fiat nations, all fiat currencies. The Constitution of the United States, Article 1, Section 8, defines the powers of Congress. It has two powers among many others. One, to coin money, and to provide for the punishment of counterfeiting. To coin money. According to Harvard University's Robert Nadelson in a very interesting paper, he determined that to coin means to create, as in to coin a phrase. So we're talking about all kinds of money. Congress can create all kinds of money, paper bills, metallic coins, anything else. And Article 1, Section 8 is still in effect because there's no constitutional amendment that overrides it. So where does the US dollar come from? Who creates it? And the answer to that question is the central bank. In the United States, the central bank is called the Federal Reserve. But the Federal Reserve doesn't just create money, doesn't create the dollar because they want to. They only create it when they are commanded to do so by the Treasury. The Treasury only does it when they are commanded to do so by a law that the president signed and after the federal budget is passed. And the president signed a law that was originally a bill written by Congress. And of course, it should be stated that Congress is under the influence of big money lobbyists and donors. So the answer to who creates the dollar is the central bank. The answer to who authorizes the creation of the dollar is Congress. The United States Congress is the monopoly currency issuer of the US dollar. They're the only ones who are allowed to authorize the creation of or appropriate the dollar. Congress is the source of the dollar. As long as the real resources are available, then Congress can create as much as they want, whenever they want, for whatever they want, to purchase those resources. All they need are the votes. We'll talk more about this later, but when I say real resources, I mean raw materials, labor, technology, and time. Here is a bill currently under consideration by Elizabeth Warren and others regarding the opioid epidemic. $2.7 billion for fiscal year 2019. This is an authorization of appropriations. Actually, shocked to even see that. When this bill is passed into law, because that number exists in this document, that is what authorizes the creation of $2.7 billion in 2019. Because they typed that number into this document with a computer. The authors of this bill have determined that that is the amount of money necessary to implement this law. Money is always created for a purpose, not just because they want pocket change. Everyone except the currency issuer, the Congress, or the federal government is a user of the currency. So me and you, our families, our households, our companies, our cities and towns, our states, and even other countries, when it comes to the United States dollar, China and Russia are users of the dollar. We are all currency users. We are all in the same position. The only difference is the amount. Created currency. So in the 1990s, Stephanie Kelton discovered Warren Mosler's ideas, and she originally set out to prove him wrong. But in the course of her research, she ended up proving him right. In 1998, she wrote a paper called "Can Taxes and Bonds Finance Government Spending?" This is the entire abstract. This is one of the earlier and more important papers of MMT. We're only going to focus on one sentence right now, and that is, modern governments actually finance all of their spending through the direct creation of high-powered money. Modern governments actually finance all of their spending through the direct creation of high-powered money. And another way of saying that is, every dollar of federal spending is and has always been created currency. Every federal benefit, every time it's paid, every federal program and agency, its creation, maintenance, and day-to-day operations. Every federal salary, every single paycheck that has ever been received from by a federal employee. And the military, the salary of every military personnel and every piece of equipment is created currency. Every single time, has always been. Yet we often hear, I don't want my taxes paying for war, I want them paying for health care. But now that we know that the military is a federal program, how does that make sense? Speaking of which, every Social Security benefit paid since 1935, when the law was passed, is created currency. So how can Social Security ever go broke, or be stolen from, or be borrowed from? And the same is true with Medicare, Medicaid, and all federal programs. And think about it. If you have no money, but you were granted the power to create it whenever you needed to, you can't keep it. You can only spend it. You can only give it to somebody else. Does it really matter that you have no money if you had that power? So what is money? What gives money value? The purpose of a government is to compel its people to use the real resources at its disposal for the benefit of society. What they define as beneficial. And since we define the government, what we define as beneficial. Money, as created by the currency issuer, is the incentive given to the people for doing these things. You do as the government asks, they pay you with their money. It is our federal paycheck. After taxes, that money is ours to keep, no strings attached. We owe it to no one. It is debt-free. Remember that. Debt-free. Money is what a government uses to provision itself. We need to be defended. We need rule of law. We need infrastructure. We need to take cool inventions and scale them up for bigger use. We need to gather intelligence and lots of other things. The government needs these things to be done, so it tells the people to do it. And since we are the government, we need it. Money has value because it is backed by the full faith and credit of the government. And that's true. But what it's more accurately stated as is money has value because people have faith that the government will do something severe if they do not pay federal taxes with the money that the government gave them. Because of this, you must get a job in order to get their money, in order to pay federal taxes with their money, in order to avoid those penalties. In other words, federal taxes drive money. And notice the order of operations. We cannot pay our taxes until we get money from the government. And even if you don't have to pay federal taxes, so maybe you're homeless or maybe you have no job, you still need to get the government's money in order to purchase things from others who do have to pay their taxes with that money. Federal taxes do not fund federal spending. Federal spending funds federal taxes. And it's not just a cute statement. It is precisely true. We cannot pay our taxes until we obtain money from the government. Same abstract by Stephanie Kelton, another sentence. It is argued that the proceeds from taxation and bond sales are technically incapable of financing government spending. And when she says technically incapable, she means logistically impossible, as we will see. Economist Pavlina Cherneva. The federal government cannot possibly pre-fund its programs in any technical sense of the word. Taxes are not stockpiled in any material sense for future respending. Economist Randall Wray. Indeed, if government spends and lends currency into existence, it clearly does not need tax revenue before it can spend. All federal spending is created currency, which logically extends which means that federal taxes do not pay for anything and cannot pay for anything. And at the end of the Great Depression, Americans had no money. Yet this is exactly when the U.S. government paid for two of the biggest programs in our history, World War II and FDR's New Deal. Yet there was no money to tax. Stephanie Kelton, 1998. Stephanie Kelton, same paper. Taxes are not even capable of financing government spending since their collection implies their destruction. So now we know where money comes from. Now let's take a look at how money is created and how it works its way through the economy. This is done by a process called reserve accounting. So we have a calculator, and we have 900 on that calculator. And what we want to do is add 100 to it to make 1,000. And I should say, reserve accounting demonstrates why federal taxes don't fund federal spending. And this is the subject of Stephanie Kelton's paper, which is mind-blowing. So, when we want to add 100 onto a calculator, where does that 100 come from? Do we need to get it somewhere? Do we need to find it, or fund it, or borrow it, or pay for it before we can add it? Of course not. You press 100, and it is. You are the god of numbers on that calculator. And that is pretty close to how the currency issuer creates money. The currency issuer is the god of their own money. Money is created because they will it to be. For the issuer only, spend is exactly the same thing as create. They spend money into existence. They spend money into the economy. So reserve accounting occurs at a country's central bank. Let's show how the central bank is relevant to us. So I have a bank account at Wells Fargo, a local branch on Fork Landing Road in my town, along with a lot of other people and businesses. There are local Wells Fargo branches all around the country, each with lots of bank accounts, with lots of people and businesses and individuals. And all of these local Wells Fargo's local branches are managed by Wells Fargo Corporate. Wells Fargo itself has a bank account at the central bank. And they have about $600 billion in their bank account. And this is a significant percentage of the total amount of all bank accounts at every local branch for every customer in the country. And all banks in a country have a bank account at the central bank. And more accurately, it's a spreadsheet. 2 columns, the bank's name, how much they have. I have $1,000 in my bank account at the local bank. My bank has $600 billion in their reserve account, or reserves, at the central bank. It's the same thing, just different names and different amounts. The central bank is the bank's bank, and it is also the top bank. Central banks do not have bank accounts at an Earth bank or a universe bank. There is no Earth bank, there is no universe bank. I'm recording audio notes to myself. So 3 examples of reserve accounting. 1 showing the creation of money, 1 showing the destruction of money, and 1 showing how money is transferred. Example 1, creating money. So Social Security, Grandma is due a Social Security check, $300. How does the government give Grandmom her Social Security benefits? The Social Security Administration determines that Grandmom is due $300. They communicate that to the central bank. The central bank communicates with Grandmom's bank, and this is what happens. The reserves of Chase Manhattan are increased by $300. That's what the central bank does. And then Grandmom's bank increases her bank account by $300. This is called marking up an account. The numbers were made bigger. Now let's start all over again. Opposite. Now Grandmom owes $100 in taxes to the government. So how does this work? Now we're destroying money. And example 2, now we're destroying money. How does this work? How does taxes get from Grandmom to the government? Grandmom sends in her tax return and her $100 check to the IRS. The IRS communicates that to the central bank. The central bank communicates with Grandmom's bank. And this is what happens. Grandmom's bank's reserves are reduced by $100. Grandmom's bank account is reduced by $100. Numbers were made lower. This is called marking down an account. So when numbers are made bigger, Social Security benefit, money is created. It's born. When numbers are made lower, such as when we pay taxes, money is destroyed, disappears, or dies. And this is all done by pressing keys on a computer keyboard. And to be clear, this presentation only relates to federal taxes. State and local are totally different. So what does it mean for money to die or be destroyed? When a child draws a bill onto a piece of construction paper, money is created. Now he erases that bill. What happened to that money? Where did it go? At the end of the game, the scoreboard is lowered back down to 0. What happened to those points? Where did they go? We have 1,000 on a calculator now, and we want to minus 100 from it so it becomes 900. Where did the 100 go? What happened to it? And the answer is, it didn't go anywhere because it never existed to begin with. To the federal government, money is an idea, a concept. It's not a thing. Here is Ben Bernanke confirming this. This is called marking up an account or marking down an account by making numbers bigger or smaller. Ben Bernanke was the Federal Reserve Chairman during the Great Recession of 2008, and here he is in an interview in 2009.
Commitments of $1 trillion, doubling the size of the Fed's balance sheet.
Is that tax money that the Fed is spending?
It's not tax money. The banks have accounts with the Fed much the same way that you have an account in a commercial bank. So to lend to a bank, we simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account that they have with the Fed. So it's much more akin, although not exactly the same, but it's much more akin to printing money than it is to borrowing.
Okay. To lend to a bank, we simply use the computer at the Fed to mark up the size of the account. And when he says not exactly the same, he simply means it's on a computer, so it's not physical money, such as paper bills or metallic coins. Reserve accounting example 3, transferring money. I receive a paycheck from my company, paper paycheck, for $100. This is how money moves from one bank to another, and this is no more than the first 2 examples put together. I have a bank account at one bank. My company has a bank. My company has a bank account at another bank. My company gives me a paper check. I give the paper check to my bank. They say the money will be there in about 24 hours. They communicate this to the central bank. And this is what happens. On my company side, their bank account is lowered by 100. Their bank's reserves are lowered by 100. And now on my side, my bank's reserves are raised by 100. And then my bank account is raised by 100. This is called reserve accounting. This is how money moves from one bank's reserves to another bank's reserves. $5 trillion goes through the central bank system in the United States every day. That's about $2 quadrillion a year. Since federal taxes don't pay for anything, why do we pay federal taxes at all? First, federal taxes drive money. Money is a tool that the government uses to provision itself. And federal taxes are the reason that we pay our bills and debts with the government's money instead of gold coins and chickens or barter. Federal taxes are one of many tools for controlling inflation. We could raise taxes on a product. We can raise taxes on a product or on the people themselves to reduce demand on that product. We could do the opposite. We could lower taxes on a product or on the people themselves to increase demand on that product. Federal taxes can be used to impose moral decisions. We could increase taxes to discourage behavior by making it more expensive. We could decrease taxes to encourage behavior by making it less expensive. We could raise taxes on the super wealthy to discourage immoral levels of wealth inequality. We need to tax the rich because they're too damn rich. They profit off of our suffering. They purchase our politicians and our laws, and they are destroying our ability to live on the planet. Taxing the rich will reduce their power. We must tax the rich because it is the moral and right thing to do, not because we need their money. Because when it comes to federal programs, the currency issuer can't get their money, no matter how hard they try. What is the federal deficit really? The federal deficit is the amount of money spent by the government in a single year minus what it collects back in taxes. So if the government spent $3 trillion this year, they tax back $1.7 trillion this year, the federal deficit is $1.3 trillion. That is the amount of money in the economy, left in the economy, left in the people's pockets. How much our government spends is not important. What matters is what our government does and does not do. Who they do it for and who they don't do it for. What matters is how moral and equitable and efficient and inflationary their spending is. And what matters is that they funnel their spending to the wealthy few because our representatives are bribed to do it. The problem is not that our government spends too much or how much they spend. The problem is income inequality and poverty and suicide and ridiculously expensive pharmaceuticals. What the government does is more important than what's left over. The federal deficit is and should be called our federal paycheck or national income. All money in the economy comes from the currency issuer. Even if you work at a store that does no business with the government. For example, you work at a grocery store. Company A does have a contract with the government. They do what they're supposed to do, they get their money. They pay their employees. One of their employees tips a waitress at a restaurant. That waitress goes shopping at your grocery store, and then your grocery store pays you in your paycheck. All money in the economy comes from the currency issuer. What is the national debt, really? Currency users require income. If we don't get it from the government, we must get it from somewhere else. An example is to borrow it from a bank. So you and I, currency users, go to a bank and we ask for a loan, say $1,000. They analyze our financial history, our credit history, our employment history, and if they decide that we are likely to pay it back, then they give us the money. When we receive that money, we are instantly in debt to that bank for $1,000 plus interest. The bank will do whatever it takes to get their money back. And this kind of debt is scary. We owe it to a for-profit private corporation. This is called private debt. This is called private debt. There is no bank above the currency issuer. There is simply no equivalent situation for the currency issuer. The god of money does not need to ask anyone for the money that only it can create. Every federal paycheck, what we used to call the federal deficit, after taxes, since the first dollar was created in 1796, accumulates into our investments, bank accounts, and wallets of every citizen. Practically speaking, the national debt is our debt-free savings, because savings by definition means that we are not in debt for it. And like a paycheck from work after taxes, we get to keep this money, no strings attached. We owe it to no one. Here is Alan Greenspan. He was the predecessor to Ben Bernanke on the Federal Reserve. This is an interview in 2012.
Are U.S. Treasury bonds still safe to invest in?
Very much so. I think this is not an issue of credit rating. The United States can pay any debt it has because we can always print money to do that. So there is zero probability of default.
The United States can pay any debt it has because we can always print money to do that. And he means the same way as Ben Bernanke did, which is in a computer. There is zero probability of default. He didn't say low probability. He didn't say remote probability. He said zero probability. The national debt is our debt-free savings. For a currency issuer, the problem is never too much debt. Too much savings is not a problem. The problem is wealth inequality, not wealth. Yes, the currency issuer has what is technically called a debt. It is a public debt, but it's not one that they ever need to worry about, because to the currency issuer, paying back even trillions in treasuries and securities and interest is effortless. And since no resources are involved in paying it back, it is completely harmless. As long as the government still exists, there is zero probability of default. It is literally impossible for the currency issuer to not be able to pay its bills. Therefore, to the currency issuer, $1 is no different than $1 trillion. The national debt is and should be called our national savings. The real national debt that really will bankrupt our grandchildren is environmental devastation, and that has nothing to do with money. The Pony for All Act of 2018. Hillary Clinton to Bernie Sanders in her book regarding the 2016 campaign. It's so nice you want to give everybody a pony, Bernie. Everybody would love a pony, but how are you going to pay for it? So let's do a thought experiment. Let's actually try and give every citizen a free pony if they want one. Because as silly as it is, it can be done. Perhaps not every single citizen, but certainly we can do it on a very large scale. What would it actually take to make this a reality? And the first step is to understand our current situation. You can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. For example, in the United States, we have 320 million people, and we have about 500,000 ponies. So demand far outstrips supply. We must make this roughly equal, or we're going to have a big problem. The Pony for All Act, by design, is for all. So we don't want to decrease demand in this situation. Therefore, we must increase supply. We must increase 500,000 to 320 million ponies. How do we do that? Given our current state of science and technology, and given the scale that we need to do this, the only realistic situation is to reproduce. Mommy and daddy ponies are going to have to do their thing over and over and over again. Another question that we have to answer: how long will this take? We need to in order to answer that question, In order to answer that question, we need to understand the biological realities of ponies. How many are there currently? What is their gestation period? After giving birth, how long does a mommy pony need to wait before doing her thing again? How old does a pony need to be in order to give birth? What's the mortality rate? Given our current situation, given these biological realities, we determine that it will take about 20 years. So let's begin. Now the pony population is exploding. We can care for 500,000 ponies, no problem. We've been doing that. But now we're on our way to hundreds of millions. And this has enormous consequences. It means that we will need more supplies. It means that we will need to educate millions of people to help and manage this program. It means that we will need to distribute all of these things around the country to avoid overcrowding and to bring it closer to the people that will need them. So now we're talking shipping and trucking. So this creates a new industry with good new jobs, and this is an excellent side benefit, but it is not the important point. Now it's 20 years later, and we have 320 million ponies, and it's time for the people to pick them up. They go to Ponies R Us. It is totally organized. We have the best people. That's not the issue. But the people don't know how to train. The people don't know how to take care of ponies, so we have to train them. Their homes are not prepared to take care of ponies, so we need to prepare them. All of the supplies and labor and services that we just discussed are now needed at a micro level by everybody. And with hundreds of millions of ponies, the end of life, what happens when they die? That is a serious consideration. So it takes about 20 years. And notice that nowhere in here have we said a word about money. So it will take 20 years. What would happen if we force it to go faster? My little girl's not going to wait 20 years. My little girl wants her pony now. So let's say we want it to happen in 5 years. We make it the law. We threaten severe consequences. We throw money at it. $10 trillion, whatever it takes. What happens? And the answer is nothing. Nothing happens, because forcing it to happen faster just doesn't work, because no amount of money can change biological processes. No amount of money can change how quickly people can be educated, or how fast we can distribute these things, or how long it takes to train citizens or prepare their homes. If the real resources are available to purchase, then creating the money to purchase them is not inflationary. And when I say real resources, I mean raw materials, labor, technology, and time. If you have the resources to do it, do it. If you don't, don't. To the federal government, to the currency issuer, money doesn't matter. Only real resources, only reality matters. Nothing can make the Pony for All Act happen in less than 20 years. The realities of real resources are outside of human control. Money and rules are human-created concepts. It doesn't matter how many rules you have or how good those rules are. Humans don't follow rules. No matter how corrupt a person or organization is, the limitations of real resources cannot be violated. If we can actually give all citizens a free pony, as silly as that is, because we can, then why can't we give people universal health care and college? And since no real resources are directly involved in doing so, why can't we cancel all student debt? Confirming everything that we just discussed, Alan Greenspan talking with former Speaker Paul Ryan regarding Social Security, and keep in mind that this is congressional testimony under oath.
So having personal retirement accounts is another way of making a future retiree benefits more secure for their retirement. And also, do you believe that personal retirement accounts as a component to a system of solvency does help improve solvency? Because when you have a personal retirement account policy, it's accompanied with a benefit offset. With that feature in place, do you believe that personal retirement accounts can help us achieve solvency for the system and make those future retiree benefits more secure?
Well, I wouldn't say that the pay-as-you-go benefits are insecure in the sense that there's nothing to prevent the federal government from creating as much money as it wants and paying it to somebody. The question is, how do you set up a system which assures that the real assets are created which those benefits are employed to purchase? So it's not a question of security. It's a question of the structure of a financial system which assures that the real resources are created for retirement as distinct from the cash. The cash itself is nice to have, but it's got to be in the context of the real resources being created at the time those benefits are paid, so that you can purchase real resources with the benefits, which of course are cash.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a question of economic security. It's a question that the real resources are created for retirement so that they can purchase the real resources with the Social Security benefits, which is money. So in his own way, he came to the same conclusion as we did in our thought experiment. Generally speaking, seniors don't need money. They need the things that they can purchase with that money. They need the resources. What MMT reveals to me. So now we're no longer talking about MMT, we are talking about I have learned MMT, and these are the conclusions that I draw after learning it because of that knowledge.
When are we going to get serious, Candy, about the debt?
We got to deal with this big long-term debt problem, or it will deal with us.
But it's very simple. The government works like your house works. Our government has promised far more money than it actually has or probably ever will have.
We have to reduce our deficit, and we have to get back on a path that will allow us to pay down our debt.
We understand America is broke.
There is an urgent need for us to contain the growth of the deficit.
Taking money from our children and borrowing from China.
Our rising debt levels poses a national security threat.
We're broke. America's broke. Is to take out a credit card from the Bank of China in the name of our children, driving up our national debt.
When we raise and borrow all this money, 42 cents out of every dollar coming out of Washington, it's borrowed. 47% is coming from other countries like China.
Thanks to Jeff Ginter for putting that video together for me. So are they lying, or do they just not know? And as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter. I give benefit of the doubt to powerless people. I don't give benefit of the doubt to powerful people that get benefit from the powerless people remaining ignorant about how the economy works. Our federal representatives, media, and so-called experts incessantly tell us that it is not possible to give us the things that we need to survive. Even though they really want to, they can't. Because they tell us if they dared even try give these things to us, it would cause inflation, raised taxes, wasted taxpayer money, and a ballooning debt and deficit. They tell us that not even preventing death, suffering, bankruptcy, and unemployment are more important than fiscal responsibility. Because China and economic Armageddon, and of course, how are you going to pay for it? Fiscal responsibility to me and you is critical. Private debt can be ruinous for currency users. We do have to worry about money. We do have to worry about bills and debt collectors and bankruptcy. We do have to worry about penalties and punishment if we can't pay our bills. Public debt, debt to the currency issuer, the one and only source of money, is nothing. The currency issuer has a lot of things to worry about, but one of them is not, has never been, and never will be money. MMT reveals that these concerns for fiscal responsibility are not just inaccurate, they're nonsensical. Many countries have an abundance of resources sitting idle or underutilized, or used inefficiently or immorally. MMT demonstrates that they can easily provide for all of their people. And when I say provide, I don't mean luxury. I mean basic human rights. Yet they withhold that abundance from the people, leaving the people to fight over the scraps. This creates a scarcity mindset. I deserve what I have and more. You deserve less than me or nothing. And if you have less, it's not because society is unjust. It's because you are poor, black, lazy, gay, stupid, a woman, or you came to this country illegally. While this is terrible and disgusting, what's really disgraceful is the system that allows it to happen. Our government lets its people fight over scraps when they have more than enough to provide for all. They shame and punish its people for making bad decisions when they could easily prevent them from having to face the decision in the first place. Our government manufactures scarcity. Because of this, in order to survive, we have to be terrible to each other and to our families and to ourselves. Our representatives would rather be legally bribed into millionairedom by billionaires than to help a desperate people. And since our government won't provide for us, we are forced into the arms of for-profit private corporations for our everyday survival. We are forced into private debt, bank loans, student loans, debt because we have terrible health care or no health care at all. And the owners of those companies who profit off of us are the very same ones who bribe our politicians. MMT reveals that big things are possible right now and always have been. The only thing we need to do is figure out what the people need to survive, figure out how to do it morally, efficiently, and without inflation, and then do it. How are you going to pay for it? If the people don't understand how our economy works, then there is absolutely no point in discussing policy at all, regardless your point of view. Our conceptions of what are possible and not possible are so far off to be meaningless. So those who are misinformed or skeptical or want to, prevent MMT from being recognized will say things like the following. Sure, we can create money, but not without causing inflation. And it's like saying, and this is like saying, sure, we can drink water, but not without making our stomachs explode. If you're not thirsty, stop drinking. Sure, we can fill the tire with air, but not without making it blow up. It's a tire, an air pump, and a pressure gauge. We can handle this. This is not complicated. Sure, we can drive the car, but not without causing a terrible accident. The car is too powerful, and we are too stupid. We have many tools to prevent, detect, and respond to inflation. And hyperinflation, occurring in an economy such as the United States, is not only unlikely, it is nonsensical and absurd. You either have faith in the people or you don't. And currently, only the super wealthy understand how the economy works, and that's why they're the only ones who get what they want. The problem is not the government. The problem is those who have hijacked the government for their own purposes and have shut us out. Here is the technically correct answer to how are you going to pay for it. Every federal program is paid for with congressional appropriations. We are a fiat currency. If we have the real resources to do it, then you can choose to create the money to purchase those resources to do it. But here is the only answer that I believe should be given. We will pay for it by getting you out of office and replacing you with someone who will never ask that question again. They will do whatever it takes to just get the job done. And until that day, 100% of our energy and time will be dedicated to making your life a living hell until you either give it to us or get out of office. You and I need to worry about money. We don't need to worry about money when it comes to the federal government of the richest nation in the history of the world. MMT is non-fiction economics. Learning MMT will not stop the corrupt from doing bad things. It won't. Learning MMT will stop the corrupt from stopping us from doing good things. Thank you. So you will find comments, you will find resources in the comments to get started learning more if you want. I don't see any questions at the moment, so, and I also believe that learning this is critical if you want a candidate, a president like Bernie Sanders or someone like him, because we waste so much time talking about things that make no sense. We debate over the finances of federal programs, and both sides of that debate are completely wrong. We need to talk about the morality of these programs, not how we pay for them. All right, thank you for being with me. I'm going to guess that the people watching right now are mostly down under. So thanks for being with me. It is really late. I had a super long nap today, so I'm tired but not exhausted. But it's time to go to bed. Thanks for being here, and I will do this again. I've been doing this quite a lot, and I'm planning on doing more. I'm giving this for the first time formally on April 23rd, and I'm just trying to rehearse it and improve it as much as I possibly can. So I'm doing it here. I'm also doing it on Facebook, on Citizens Media TV on Facebook. So I'm going to go back and forth. Thanks. Good night, everybody.